When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 63, A Traumatic Brain Injury and the 1% Medical Marvel. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Dr. Wanda J. Berger. Dr. Berger began her career as a psychiatric nurse. After recovering from a serious accident, she returned to college and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Spanish and a Master of Science in Community Counseling, followed by a PhD in Philosophy of Faith-Based Counseling. In 2004, she and her family relocated to her birthplace, North Carolina, where she began working as a dually licensed clinician. Since then, she has worked as a dually licensed supervisor and clinical director for major companies in North Carolina, along with her own practice. In 2014, after leading trainings for various programs, she became an approved continuing education provider for the National Board for Certified Counselors and National Association for Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Counselors, along with North Carolina Addictions Specialist Professional Practice Board approved trainings. Currently, Katie and Calvin, registered therapy animals, work with her in her Yadkinville office, offering trauma therapy to civilians, first responders, and military during the week. On weekends, you will find them along with her husband traveling or in the office to conduct trainings and supervision. Well, hello, Dr. Berger. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hello, thank you.
Dr. Berger, I am so pleased to have this opportunity to have you be a guest on the show today, and I'm really grateful for the willingness that you bring with you to tell your story. For me, I often really feel blessed to encounter guests who allow me space to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw their strength, insight, and inspiration from, all the stories that are shared here. It's really important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma. So I really appreciate you being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Dr. Berger, in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And one thing that we really know and that we've been able to take note of is that no matter what the person's story is about, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way which remains tucked away. So on this platform, it's really meant to serve in a way to break those barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, my hopeful mission is for the both of us to be able to encourage people to share and tell what people typically have reservations to express. And of course, I continue to bring forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. Dr. Berger, I'm really curious. What is the first thing that pops into your mind when you hear the phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
Wow. In my practice, working with trauma, my goal is to help lead the people to the person that they want to be, that they're meant to be. And when you say that phrase, it encapsulates the beauty of a person healing, transforming from a cocoon into a butterfly. So I love that phrase.
You know, you talk about the transforming from the cocoon to the butterfly. That is the true essence of Dare to Heal. It's the transformation of the butterfly. So I think that's so fitting that even you are able to capture that beauty. That's amazing. And I really like what you said about leading people to who they want to be, the person they want to become, and it being a new concept to heal. Do you see a parallel between trauma healing versus trauma informed in any way?
Oh, please, I'm not going to get on a soapbox here. However, as a trainer, I will open my trainings with, today, you're going to learn the difference between trauma-informed and trauma in its fullness and helping others. And by the time the training is over, I do interactive trainings and I will let them know. Trauma-informed is to help you see what trauma is. And if you are not certified or licensed as a trauma specialist, then you have enough information to get the people to a trauma specialist. And I close it with, and remember your license say that you do not work outside your area of expertise. So this is a soapbox for me.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Okay, so without further anticipation, Dr. Berger, let's get the bigger part of the interview started. I know it's going to be great. Are you ready?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Dr. Berger, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
Changing Seasons.
Changing Seasons. So what's inspired this title for you?
Because through my life, things keep changing. And when the head injury hit, my whole life changed as I knew it. And through the course of the recovery and pulling myself and finding myself again and reinventing myself, everything changed. It was like the seasons, and each step of the way was different than the last.
And I seem to recall this is also a up-and-coming book title.
Yes, I wrote the book once back when computers were just coming out, and when my head injury was really bad, and I gave it to a lady who was a friend, who was an author, and she proofread it for me, and we were getting ready to submit it, and we had two people who were interested in it. And the woman got a divorce, the husband took things from the house, and the book disappeared. The second one I did on the computer, and we had sent it in. The people didn't receive it, and this is when I had my first office called Changing Seasons, and our computers had crashed. So it was lost, and unfortunately, back then it was the floppy disk, and I never saved it on the floppy disk. So I have started it for the third time, and I've been on page 90 for a few months, and I was at a difficult spot, a difficult memory, and had to really work through it, and picked it back up again today. And when I had a break and actually got a good half a page written. So we're getting back there.
That's great. Well, they say a third time's the charm, right? So
Boy, I'm praying and hoping for that one. Yes.
I'm going to cross my fingers for you. And it's also nice to hear that today itself, you picked it back up to write another page or half page. That's awesome.
I was sort of inspired by talking with you tonight, and I thought, I have got to do this.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. That's really lovely to hear. So, yeah. Well, then let's segue right into your untold story. Why don't you tell us what it's all about? Give us that summary of the main events. What happened? What took place?
The main event was I was a single mother, and I was a charge nurse at a local rehabilitation center for seniors, and lived 5 or 6 miles from the facility. And this happened to be a Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember. And I had worked the daylight shift, and I was dating a nice guy who picked me up, and we went and picked up my teenage son who was playing volleyball with the youth group at the church. And then we came back home. And we were 1 mile from the house, and a driver came, and it was a secondary road that we were on, and then there were side roads, and a car ran a stop sign and T-boned us. The car flipped over, I am told, 2.5 times. The roof ripped off the top. They found me on top of the roof, unconscious, 250 feet from the bottom of the car.
Oh my goodness. How long ago was this?
It was March 1991.
Wow, 1991. And so the car flipped over, the roof came off, you were on the roof, you're 250 feet from the vehicle, and you were unconscious.
Yes.
What happened next?
I woke up in the emergency room and apparently was making some noises and trying to open my eyes. And I hear this voice saying, "Hold still. Don't touch anything. Keep your eyes closed." And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And then the next voice I hear is, "She's alive. She's awake." And another voice says, "Wanda, this is the doctor. Don't move. One person is sewing your eyelid on, and I am sewing your kneecap right now. Don't move." And then he said, "We didn't think that you would be able to move. We thought you would be paralyzed." He said, "But when you woke up, you moved both your hands and your feet. So the good news is you're not paralyzed." And then someone else yells and said, "The ER is full and there's many emergencies, but you're our number one case." So I'm laying there with my eyes closed, and then I disregarded what the doctor said. I moved my hands to touch my face, and somebody grabbed my hand and said, "We're going to wipe your eye off. We're done with your eye, and the sticky stuff you feel is blood." So that's how I found out what was going on, and when I woke up.
Wow. And you heard all of those comments, and all of these different messages were coming to you, and you had to keep your eyes closed. Were you freaking out on the inside, or were you somehow able to stay calm and process all of that?
I was a nurse, and they always put me on the, in the blue crash cart. Wherever I was, I always got called to that. I wasn't freaking out. I was just like, "Oh, I'm alive. I'm moving my body parts." So I guess I wasn't at that point. Yeah.
And did you feel like getting that information from other people, like that it helped you stay calm or helped you stay present?
It helped orient me a little bit because when I woke up, I was like, where am I? I was confused at first as to what was going on. Then after I got my eyes opened, one of the nurses said, and this confused me, said, "Your husband and your son are in 2 other areas, and we're taking care of them." And I thought, I'm not married. Who's my husband? So it was sort of like
Right.
trying to focus to come out of a deep fog. So they just assumed the person
Hmm.
that I had been seeing was the husband.
Right, because you'd already gone to pick up your son.
Yeah,
So it was an easy thing to put together, even though
yeah.
inaccurate. Was your son okay?
We actually wrote Jordache because he had these sneakers on that were Jordache. And he was
Hmm.
thrown from the back of the vehicle, but landed on his shoes. And the doctor in that, they checked and they did all the x rays in that. And they said, we really think that these shoes saved his body.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. And so then how long did you stay in the hospital, or what did rehabilitation look like? How many surgeries did you have? Like,
Okay. So this is a really odd part. They put me in, and I was in
mhm,
initially for a week. And I was in a smaller hospital.
okay.
They had not taken me to Pittsburgh. They had taken me to the local hospital. And when they came to discharge me, I couldn't hold my head up without the room going in circles. And I was having emesis from the dizziness, and I couldn't turn my head even slowly left to right without the room going in circles. And the doctor said, well, you're in
Mm,
good condition. You just need to go home and heal. And I said, I
mhm,
disagree with you. And the
mhm,
nurse that was doing the discharge summary, she said, Wanda, when they get you out of here, have them take you to the other hospital. So I was so sick and so tired, I had them just take me home. And I stayed there for a few days. And then they took me in to see a doctor who started to pull in all the specialists. And they pulled in a doctor from Pittsburgh who was a neurologist that
mhm,
worked for the Mayo Clinic
mhm,
and actually taught.
mhm.
They got me involved in a lot of rehab, and they didn't think that I would ever work again. They did IQ tests. There were things that had to be done every day. And my family
Mhm.
wasn't close by. So I belonged to a very large church that had a singles group that had a couple hundred people in it. And the people there
Mhm.
made sure that I got to all my doctor's appointments and the physical therapy and the neurologists and all of that. But it was a long, long recovery.
Mhm. Yeah, I can't imagine what a recovery like that would have looked like. You say it was long. Did it take over a year to start being able to walk? I'm so curious. I'm trying to, like, visualize this because you're talking about it so calmly, and it was so intense, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to piece it all together.
It took a year for me to be able to turn my head left to right without the rooms going in circles.
Hmm.
It was a daily battle. They had me on a ton of medicine. They were afraid of seizures. I was told
Mhm.
later that with the medications they had me on, that I had a window from
Mhm.
12 o'clock to 3 o'clock that I was clear and could function well. And the rest of the time was just very, very on the couch with darkened rooms and ice packs and things just to be able to keep going.
Right. So that's what you mean by daily battle. There's a
Yes.
lot of different components in the healing journey.
But I looked okay. After all the black and blue and purple marks went away from my face and body,
Mhm.
the real battle was for family members who would see me. Well, you look fine. You must be doing okay. And that's where the mental battle came in.
Mhm. And so what was that like?
Oh, I had teenagers. They were 14 and 16 at the time. And they were used to super mom, nurse and running them here,
Mhm.
running them there. And I physically couldn't do that. So my teenagers became angry at
Mhm.
me. My family got upset with me because I looked fine,
Mhm.
and they just thought that I believe the word is malingerer, meaning, you're just trying to get out of working, or you're just trying to get pity. And in the meantime, I could barely function, and they didn't live near me, so they really didn't understand it. That was the real battle.
Wow. That is a real battle. Right. And so tell me more about this 1%. We were talking about they were expecting that perhaps you'd be paralyzed and then expecting that perhaps you wouldn't be able to walk. So tell me more about that part.
So the doctor in the hospital said, the accident you were in, we would consider only 1% of the people living. And he says, I don't know about the rest. But when I got together with the neurologist from Pittsburgh, and the really funny part is the neurologist from Pittsburgh's last name was Berger, but he was Hungarian. He was not German. My husband now is a Berger, Burger, and my neurologist at that time was Berger, Berger. He is the one that also taught at the Mayo Clinic and took my case to the Mayo Clinic. And they're the ones that said only 1% of the people would have lived in that accident, and only 1% of the people would have walked again. And they told me a year in, they made me file for disability because they told me I probably would never be able to work again. So we did file for disability, and they did put me on disability. But I told the judge from Pittsburgh, I asked him if the recorder was off, and I said, I will get better and I will work again. And he said, he pointed his finger at me and said, and that young lady is why you won your case today. And so when they gave the decree, he wrote in there that when I returned to work, I would not lose my insurance because it was a pre-existing condition, and that I would continue to have the insurance. But that was a hard thing for me, and I cried because the specialists did not think, even though I was recovering, they didn't think I would ever work again. So it was a several years battle to overcome. And in 99, I had made enough progress. I asked the neurologist if I could take a college class. And he says, I think that'd be good for you. He said, but I will write you a letter so that if you have to get up during class or need to take a test and there's too many people, we'll make a special letter for you for special conditions.
Like accommodation.
Yeah. And then after that, I made 2 A's. So I said to him, I went to college, I made an A, and he says, okay, now you can take 2. So I signed up for full courses. But with his letter, it gave me what I needed. So I could tape a class. I could get up and leave if I was too sick or too dizzy. And if I couldn't focus to take a test, they would give me a special room by myself. And that's how I got through my undergrad when I returned to school.
Congratulations. That's definitely an achievement under all the duress that you've been under.
It was hard. I was very sick. My husband was a big support and did all the things that needed to be done to help me get through.
So before 1999, before you made enough progress to be able to go to college and take these courses, I'm curious about, what did a tough day look like for you? I know you had, every day was a daily battle, but what was a tough day really like? What was that like for you?
We had a house that was really sound, and there was a den in the house. And that den, there was 2 doors, one to the hallway and one out to the living room. And there was only one window in the den. And that became my hangout place. And so on a really bad day, I would get up, could barely get a shower, maybe pay homage to the porcelain throne. I was so bad. And then I would go down into the den and pull the shades on the window and lay in that dark den with ice on my head, dark room. And that would be most of my day, only getting up if I was getting sick or had to visit the bathroom. That was a really bad day.
And when you were going through that, I'm assuming there was more than just physical pain. What was it like for you emotionally? Like, what kinds of things were going through your mind?
It was challenging. I was misunderstood by my family, and even more so misunderstood by my husband's family, who didn't know me before the accident. They only met me after the accident. And no one on each side of the family, no one really understood the pain and the struggle that I went through. And back then in the early days, my memory was shot. I could tell you one thing and 5 minutes later tell you again and not know that I told you. And I didn't have a lot of patience. You hear of people talking about, in recovery that they did a drug or something, it'd make them look like they were quote unquote bipolar. Well, right. I wasn't myself. I didn't recognize me. I didn't have patience with people, would get anxious or get really sad during that period of time. And I don't know how much it was the head injury or some of the medicines that they gave me to prevent seizures. So it was an emotional roller coaster. Emotionally, I was just distraught over people who I thought loved me and cared for me, but did not believe that there was anything wrong with me.
Do you feel like that changed the dynamics in your relationships with each of these people?
It changed dynamics in many relationships. And prior to the accident and all, I had been the one that had family members come in and do the holidays and everything. I couldn't do any of that anymore. And when I married my husband, we moved 3 hours away from my family, near his family. But they saw this woman with a head injury and memory loss and did everything they could to have my husband not marry me. So there wasn't any support. So emotionally, it was the relationships that did more of a mental toll on me than the accident. Because my attitude with the accident was, I'm like a miracle. So God has kept me alive for a reason. So I know I'm going to get through this. But it was the relationships that wore on me mentally.
Right. So when did husband come into the picture? Because when you had the accident, you were not married.
This is a story in itself. So the accident was in March. And in May, at the end of May, over Labor Day weekend, the United Methodist Church has a retreat for singles. And the people at the Methodist Church said, you're going to the retreat. And I said, I am too sick to go to the retreat. I have 2 teenagers, no one to take care of them. I just want to stay home on the couch. And they said to me, you are going to the retreat. And so they lined up people to watch my kids. My son was 15 at the time. He was working at McDonald's, so he didn't have a driver's license. So people took him to work. They made sure that they had food. And so I went to this retreat up in the woods, and there were Methodist church people from all over. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be home. Who was going to be my husband walked in. It was like a big lodge, meeting lodge, and then we all had cabins. And he walks in late. He was very handsome, turned a lot of heads, and I literally got up and left the room because I thought, you know what, this is ridiculous. And later, they were going to have a dance, and I decided I was going to walk because I was still dizzy. So there was no way I could dance. And I found a group of people outside of the dance hall, and I said, hey, I'm Wanda from Butler. Would anyone want to go for a walk with me? And the girls were like, no, we're dancing. Why don't you go dance with us? And I said, I can't, so I'm just going to walk. And out of the middle of the girls comes Mick. He said, hey, I'll walk with you. And so we ended up walking all weekend and doing some horseback riding in that.
Mm-hmm.
That was Memorial Day in
Mm-hmm.
1991. And in October of 1991, we were married.
Wow.
And he knew about the car accident. He knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And the funny part is he was in an outing group. He had just gotten divorced. He was in an outing group, and they had a backpack and canoeing hiking weekend planned. And his mother had signed him up for the retreat. And he says, Mom, I'm not going. I have my own thing. And she said, I paid this amount of money. You're going. So neither one of us had planned to be there, and both of us were made to go, and we ended up meeting each other and getting married.
What a marvelous connection, right? It's totally more than coincidental.
He has supported me all these years, and he started out in psychology, but did not get his degree because he was working part-time plastering as a student. And he ended up being a real plasterer and did a really good job. He retired early in 2015. His knees were getting bad. And he decided that he would run my office. So he's worked with me since 2015.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. So are there any other parts of this untold story or this big journey of yours that you would like to share that we haven't uncovered yet?
Yeah. When Mick and I got married, and we moved to the Titusville area, the church found out my story of the head injury, and they had a program that they were supporting called Love in the Name of Christ, which is where churches get together and they help other people. And anyhow, they put me on the board of that program. And when the settlement from my accident came in, we purchased a house closer to Erie because that's where most of Mick's work was. And when we got to Union City, which was about 45 minutes from Titusville where we had started, one of the Presbyterian ministers said, we would like to start Habitat for Humanity in town. And my husband was a team leader for Habitat, and I was the prayer coordinator from the other county. And we told him that because this county was so close to the other county that they couldn't start their own, they would have to join. But we had a program called Love in the Name of Christ. So the director of Love in the Name of Christ came to my house with the Presbyterian minister and shared the program. And Rob Willard decided that I was going to help build this program. And Rob would come and pick me up, and Mick would shove me out the door. And sometimes he had to stop along the way because I was still sick. And we built this program up. We opened it in February of 1992 in the Corey, Union City, and Spartanburg area. We opened it and started it with 12 churches being volunteers, and it is still going today.
That's so remarkable. That's really, really cool. Amazing.
I believe that that's how I finally was able to get to a new season of my life and get to school.
That's incredible, and a very important piece to pay tribute to in your story in terms of the rememberings, right? And actually that brings me to the piece that I'm curious about, and that is that when people come to see me for therapy, individuals are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started with their story. Some people are in the middle, and some people are looking back. And, some people are getting started, like they've got a lot of things going on, sometimes multiple traumas, sometimes just a lot of complexity, and they don't even know where to begin. Some people are dealing with something acute that's also triggering things from the past, and things in their life are getting pretty messy. There's lots of chaos. And some people are looking back. They're hoping to get some closure, close some chapters in their lives, or deal with some unfinished business so that they can move forward. What part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
Looking back, definitely.
Yeah.
On the trauma and the seasons that brought me to now. I am where I want to be, and getting older, my goal was to be able to do trainings and supervision and to leave the fields, both mental health and substance abuse fields, better off. This is I'm here. I have achieved what I want to achieve. I'm helping people who I can leave the field. There'll be people to be able to train other people as well.
You're leaving a trail behind as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if we can circle back for a moment, I know we've talked about many parts of your story and we've uncovered all of the different pieces from the physical injuries to the pain and the physical recovery and the rehabilitation and some of the real sore points in terms of the emotional aspects and what you had to endure and being misunderstood and really going through that journey of relationships and dynamics changing. In terms of your mental health, can you speak more about how it was affected, like any other emotions you experienced or competing thoughts you had inside you or any dark moments?
There were some dark moments, and I don't lay them all on the head injury. I lay them all on the medications that doctors felt that they needed to give me. You know, I was a nurse before I was a therapist, and I have so many clients that come in and will tell me they have PTSD or some other mental illness, and they'll tell me that the medications are making them worse and it's interfering with relationships. And the dark place for me was that I wasn't myself. I couldn't get to be myself physically or emotionally. And there was nothing I could do about it. I wanted to, but there were chemical imbalances going on, which I'd never experienced before. Some people are born with chemical imbalances. Fortunately, and I praise God for this, we got out to the other side and got off those medicines.
And when you were on those medicines, you weren't yourself. So if you weren't yourself, what did it feel like? What was that experience like?
It was like a roller coaster. I didn't know if I would feel happy. I didn't know if at the snap of a finger, if someone said something that I could just bite their face off. And things would happen and I'd be like, this isn't me. And it would happen before I knew. Just totally not in control of emotions.
Yeah, and it sounds like you couldn't recognize yourself.
No.
And so when you started to see that and say, oh gosh, this really isn't me, were there other thoughts that followed?
I never thought of hurting myself. I always thought of just running away and not being around anybody. Yeah.
Just run away from it all.
Yes. But the biggest thing, and this is the most important thing in trauma, is resilience. And I had a good, firm foundation. My dad was a military sergeant, and I learned by example resiliency and to have people there. And while my family wasn't really there for me, I had all these friends, these single friends. And even when I married my husband and moved 3 hours away, people still visited us, and we would go and visit them. They just were very supportive. When I turned 40, one of the friends said, come on down for the weekend. And so, Mick took me down and they had a surprise party for me. So I had people who were supportive, who understood me, that where I drew resilience from, and people who I could talk to that, well, families like that, and you know what my family did. And that support group for anyone with trauma can give you resiliency.
Right. Absolutely. And in fact, I was going to ask you, what is your key message to the listeners of our show? What would you want them to know?
It doesn't matter what happens to you. It matters what you do with it. Find your supports. I tell my clients, healing from trauma is when you take control, because someone took control from you, but it doesn't mean that you have to allow it to affect your whole life. If you take back control, then you're taking control of your life, and you're not letting the bad thing that happened to you control you or govern where you go with it.
Let that bad thing be a bad time, but it doesn't have to become you or define you.
Exactly.
It's an event. It's not your life. It's not the definition of your life.
Yes, and ironically that you said event, because the work that I give people from their first session is, this week, I want you to look at events, positive events and negative events. Write down the event, what you were thinking, what you were feeling, and how you reacted. And when you bring your work back to me, we're going to look at what action looks like. And in the back of your journal, go over some things that have happened to you that have been traumatic. Write these events out, and we're going to discuss those and see how we can take control over them. Yes, the events don't need to define us.
Exactly. All right. So I'm curious about if you can draw on something that was inspirational for you, something that was really game-changing for you, Dr. Berger, something that's close to you that reflects your untold story. Was there like a particular quote or book or a person or an event that really sparked that pivot for you?
I think there's been a few, but my husband has been the one who has been there and has just been a driving force. He and Rob Willard just not accepting the fact that I was sick and dizzy and wanted to stay in a corner. They just pushed me and pulled me and supported me and believed that I could do what needed to be done. And that really was the spark. That and Love Inc., that those were the ones that I felt needed. I felt a purpose. And I said, I don't know if this is all there is, but I'm going to follow through on this.
Yeah, they believed in you. I'm hearing purpose, right? So to me, the other word that comes to mind is being reignited with purpose.
Yes.
That's really, really important and so significant in your journey. That's great.
I've really been blessed with good support system, and nobody has a perfect life. Nobody has a perfect system, but people have been there when I've needed them.
That's the most important thing. You reached out to people, people reached out to you, and you accepted that support and allowed yourself to stay connected to people. So that also is a really incredible step that you ensured for yourself, even on the days that you weren't sure if that's what you wanted.
Yes, and you had said to me, what would you leave the people with? And be open for support, because that's your resiliency. And that's how you make it through. Not just surviving, but you can thrive.
Yeah, that's how you make it. Yeah. So, Dr. Berger, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to? Who would that be?
Well, Love Inc. is the one that really got me off the couch and out in public and, with a purpose. So they would definitely be the organization.
You're referring to Love in the Name of Christ?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's give a shout out to Love in the Name of Christ. Yeah, it really sounds like they were the right place at the right time for you and really helped you along with receiving that community support. People were just there for you, taking you to your appointments or attending to your needs or ensuring your kids were taken care of. And I'm sure even maybe providing words of encouragement.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so, Dr. Berger, how can people connect with you if they would like to? Where can they find you?
On LinkedIn, on website, which gives the phone number and email addresses. And I believe that you post that on the podcast. I saw that with others.
Yes. And you also have a Facebook page also, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to make sure that all of these are on the show notes page that we'll have dedicated for you. So that's perfect. Okay. Dr. Berger, guess what?
What?
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Berger, I would just like to take a moment actually to show my gratitude in the story that you've shared today. While I understand this is a told story, a known story to many, and it's also the mark for all the work that you've accomplished since, it is still a story that many more need to hear. And this story is a story of your courage and your bravery and efforts to contribute to the field and for the authenticity and showing up to share so willingly today. This has not gone unnoticed. In fact, this story has been remarkably moving for me to hear and to witness. So I can only thank you so much for the deep conversation and for all of your daring and all of your sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. It's been so fantastic. Once again, Dr. Berger, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.